Howdy, folks. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, Katie and I are going to be answering a question that was asked by one of you on our question box on our website, which we love. I love that we have that. It is so fun.
It's awesome. If you guys... I'm interrupting you.
Well, I'm curious as to why. It must have been really good.
Well, just because you mentioned the question box, if people are curious, like, what are they talking about? What question box? It's linked in the description box. And so you guys can ask us questions or ask for links in the email or whatever. So anyways, we love hearing from you guys that way.
And this was a question regarding the potential of family becoming an idol. Is it possible to have your family can you idolize it and start serving it to the point as though it's a god, and it's a false god, or it's a, you know what I mean? Idol. It's an idol. And this has been mentioned quite a few times over the last few years. And so we thought we would answer this question and kind of share our thoughts on it. I do want to let you know that we are so grateful to each and every one of you listeners. If you enjoy this podcast, it would mean so much to us if you're able to take the time to leave a rating or a review on whatever platform you're listening on. If you watch our podcast on YouTube, if you subscribe to our channel, that's a blessing. If you hit the like button on the video, that's a huge blessing to us. That's what makes it reach more people. And we're really grateful when it's able to do that. We love doing this. This is fun. We're going on 5 years now. Isn't that crazy?
Really?
5 years doing the podcast. And it's been a blessing to us. I feel like we've been able to get to know some of you listeners, either online or in person, which is a tremendous blessing. And so we're grateful to do it, and we hope to keep it going.
I want to give a shout out real quick to Galilee Carlisle because she just wrote us the sweetest letter. She's been listening from the beginning, and it meant so much. Galilee, you mentioned that you aren't quite like the leave the rating or review type because of your technology situation, and we totally respect that. And it meant so much that you wrote us a letter. We have it saved in our hope chest, and so thank you very, very much.
Yes, not just a letter, a really generous gift. And that's true. So thoughtful of you.
It was.
Yeah, anyways.
It was really humbling. It made us both tear up.
It did.
Thank you.
Well, with that, let's get this thing rolling.
The Now That We're a Family podcast.
Okay, so this is totally off topic, but I was just laughing about it as I came out here. I haven't told you this, Elisha, but I was getting ready. The kids are having their quiet time right now. So the two big kids are like doing their independent school and just in their rooms. And then the younger few were napping. And I was getting my makeup on to come out here. And one of the kids looked at me and he goes, "Mommy, why does your face look fake?"
Whoa. Wow.
So it's like, I guess I might have too much makeup on.
Oh,
isn't that funny, though?
That's funny. You look great. I think what it is because you've gotten some sun over the last few days. Here,
yes.
We had one of those little, false start springs, like it's been crazy. 65-degree weather, 70-degree weather here in North Idaho in March. So we've been outside a lot, and I think you've probably your makeup combined with your color.
It's just a whole thing. Anyways, it was pretty funny I love how honest children are.
Yeah.
And how you can get a good bead on what you look like, I guess.
Yes. Yeah, no filter, no guile.
Yeah, exactly. Anyways, okay, well, I'm excited about this episode. I want to hear your thoughts on it. Elisha.
My thoughts, huh?
Yeah, that's why I'm here.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I think we've kind of talked around the issue of making family an idol. And so when it was asked directly, do you think you're in danger of making family an idol? Or do you think it's possible for your family to become an idol? My knee-jerk reaction was to kind of disregard the question. And the reason is because my father was accused of idolizing his family since as long as I can remember. And so anytime we'd be at a church or we'd be, asked to be a part of a local kind of church affiliation or local church gathering, it was always pretty apparent after a short amount of time where my dad's allegiance were. And that was first and foremost, to God, but then to his family. Like as it was so clear to him that him serving God was prioritizing his family in those years, right? In that kind of 15-year window that all of this was occurring in when I was growing up, and he was discipling me and parenting me. And so hearing this, and I wouldn't be surprised if your dad was accused of the same thing. Do you feel like that's something that maybe occurred in your home?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if it was.
Yeah.
I think we've gotten asked this question a lot over the years since you and I have started the podcast, because obviously we have this giant "now that we're a family"
Yes.
banner surrounding us, and we talk family, 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 family. And so that makes sense that we're getting this question, hey, are you putting too much emphasis on the family? I do know that my parents got flack for putting their family before, I say in air quotes, ministry. And that's something that unfortunately the Western church really gets wrong, is that we don't view family as our primary ministry. And so we get confused when we say no to other church ministry because it is at the expense of our family, and say, well, you're putting your family before God. And unfortunately, that's not the case. And so we need to stop communicating that way, because actually putting God first is putting God's authority structure first, which says that a parent's primary responsibility is first to each other and then to raising their children. And that is the church at its most nuclear, I don't know, at its smallest, in its smallest state.
Its nucleus.
Yeah, is the home.
Yeah.
That is the church that I am a part of first. Are these little disciples that are underneath us before the local body, and then before the national body, and then, a global body.
Yeah, and this doesn't have to be guesswork. Like we're told in the pastoral epistles, in Titus and in Timothy, that if you can't, what does it say? I should probably look it up.
Yeah.
Look it up, because I
got your
do
computer
think
right
this,
here.
household in order. I said I was gonna, so 1 Timothy.
1 Timothy. Try finding that one.
Okay.
I will say this, you guys. Elisha and I give each other a hard time on this podcast a lot, and not a lot, but sometimes. And I want you guys to know it is all in good fun and in love. So just know that if we're kind of heckling each other, it's because we like each other, not because we don't.
Yeah, that's a good thing to point out, because
we get that a lot in the comments.
Yeah, and I was thinking about it. I do think I don't want to do it as much as I have in the times past, and that is kind of, jest with you and make comments that, if you don't know the context or you don't know where it's coming from, could sound patronizing or condescending or rude. Because if you think about it, like when we're with friends that we've known for a long time, you can do that, right? You can do that because people get the context. And as I mentioned, even in the intro, for a lot of our listeners, it feels like we've been with them for a long time. And
you can see that with you guys, our long-term listeners that come to our defense, kind of being like, hey, like Elisha and Katie really like each other. They're just giving each other a hard time. Like they're joking. It's a joke. And maybe someone who just met us is like, what on earth?
Yeah, exactly. Because if it was a couple's first time over to our house for dinner, we wouldn't take the same liberties with each other and kind of being, sarcastic and flippant exactly in our comments. We would really, because we want what to be communicated is that we like each other a lot.
Which we do. And I know, I will say this, just because Elisha threw in sarcasm there, this is such a side tangent, but I'm not a fan of sarcasm. And I don't feel like our jests really go into sarcasm too much. But I guess I don't feel like your sarcasm is ever at my expense, because I do think I've seen that displayed very poorly, where people in marriages where there's a sarcastic spouse and it's always at the other person's expense. And I think sarcasm can really tear down your marriage. Yeah. So I don't want to condone any of that.
Yeah, I've actually been thinking a lot about this. I want to grow in what my default kind of humor is, because I do think sarcasm is a default of mine.
I love your humor, Elisha. All of it, all the layers.
Okay.
Don't grow.
But I do just want to be, I want my speech to be uplifting. I want it to be edifying to the listeners. And there's a lot of just kind of cheap comments that are just not profitable, that I hope someday to be beyond. Okay.
Well,
so what
I'm going to be entertained until then. Yes. Okay.
The passage, here's one of these passages that I was looking for. 1 Timothy chapter 3, verses 1 through, I mean, I don't know how much I'm going to read. So verse 1 through until I stop reading. If anyone wants to provide leadership.
Whoa. Are you reading that from the Message?
Oh, my word. Okay.
Not the Message.
That was the one that popped up here.
Here, that one. KJV right there.
But it's not the whole passage here. Let me see here.
We just can't read it from.
Okay, if a man desire the office of a bishop, he desireth a good work. A bishop then must be blameless, the husband of one wife, vigilant, sober, and of good behavior, given hospitality, apt to teach, not given to wine, no striker, not a brawler, not covetous, one that ruleth well his own house, having his children in subjection with all gravity. For if a man know not how to rule his own house, how shall he take care of the church of God? Did you know that mRNA vaccines are approved and in use for pigs in the U.S.? The mystery continues to grow in the meat industry, and every day I'm more thankful for my Good Ranchers subscription. I don't have to worry about imported meat, unknown vaccines, or experimental things in the meat I feed my family. During their Say mRNO to mRNA sale, Good Ranchers is offering you a free 10-pound Easter ham with any subscription. Their ham is fantastic, and unlike the pork at the store, it is guaranteed to be free from mRNA vaccines. This is a $119 ham that you will get for free with our code, VOTEBERG. So go to goodranchers.com today and say mRNO for your meat. So just say no to the vaccines right there. During this sale, every subscription enjoys $25 off any box, a free $119 heritage ham, and the Good Ranchers lifetime quality commitment. Their promise to never compromise on quality. Plus, with their never mRNO pledge, you can be sure that you're getting meat that's free from any unknown or potentially harmful additives every single month. What I really love about Good Ranchers is their commitment to transparency. They believe that you have the right to know exactly what's in your food, and they're not afraid to show you. They're amazing supporters of this show, so go support them and their stand they're taking. Are you guys enjoying listening to me read this? I did pass the third grade in reading, if you didn't know. Okay, no one else is being as loud or as effective on this issue as them, and it's because they genuinely want to provide you with the best meat in America. Go to goodranchers.com and use our code, VOTEBERG, to get your free Easter ham today. Goodranchers.com, code VOTEBERG, to say no to mRNA. Good Ranchers, American meat delivered. Okay, so this whole rigmarole, which hopefully we'll edit up so that it's not as laborious and long. Yeah, hopefully we've got a long-suffering audience here. The point that I was going to try to make with this is because it says it explicitly. If you don't have your household in order, you don't have any business doing what we consider church ministry out at the church building, or doing church counseling, doing marriage counseling, or pastoring, or being the elder, like preaching, all those things that we consider to be like the important, even missions work, like the important church work, which is important. It's like it says here, you don't have any business even thinking about doing that if you don't first have your household in order. And so to me, that's a clear indicator of what the priority list should be. It's not like, okay, this is the most important thing, so at the expense of your family. And people will say this, that like, hey, you know what? My wife's not going to get the best of me, or my kids aren't going to get the best of me because I'm doing this more important work. And I just don't believe that exists. Mm-hmm. And I do think there are seasons, though. Like, I do think that at some point in your life, you should probably move beyond putting a ton of your time and energy into child rearing, because hopefully your children are raised and they are walking with the Lord, and they've got, I guess they've got a firm foundation, so that maybe you then have bandwidth to pour into what we would consider, more of the local church or organized ministry.
And we have seen this with our parents,
yes,
as they've gone deeper into outside ministry. I mean, I feel like it was always on the sidelines of them raising their family, and then they've been able to get deeper into that as children have, as they've gone more into grandparent mode, which honestly, as I watch that, I'm like, that is 10 times more fatiguing than being a parent, parenting adult kids and grandkids and teenagers and everything in between. But I really respect that. I was going somewhere with that, but.
So getting back to the question or the topic of making your family an idol, is it possible to make your family an idol? Absolutely. What were you going to say?
I remember what I was going to say. And it was on that theme of seasons, because I think there's also times where your whole family makes a sacrifice together for something, but you're united in the sacrifice. And so, it's really hard maybe on your marriage. It's stressful on your marriage. It's stressful on the kids. And we aren't saying that you don't do things like that as a family for the gospel. You just have to make sure that you're united in that process and you aren't fragmenting in that process. So I do think there's seasons for ministry, and it's never okay to just say, okay, well, my family doesn't get the best of me, but maybe for a season of time, no one's really getting the best of anyone because you're in this very hard season of ministry, and that is where the Lord has you, and he'll bring you through it.
Yeah.
So that happens too.
I agree. And I'm sure our listeners can probably point to missionary friends that have had very healthy families and missionary friends that have had not healthy families. Same goes for pastors' families, where, oh man, that pastor's family is something to aspire to. It seems like they've got a vibrant marriage. Or, which is oftentimes more the fact that, the PK, the pastor's kid, is, kind of like this euphemism for being a prodigal or somebody that's departed from the faith or a wild child, is unfortunate. And it's not what God's expectation is. It's not what should be normal Christianity. Like, pastors are to have their children in order and walking in the faith. And so I think that, like you said, there's a difference between a family suffering together, struggling together, being on mission together, and like you said, that marriage still being strong, the relationship between the parents and the children still being strong, and the parents still tending to the needs of their children in those seasons. I think it totally can happen, and I do. And again, even with the work thing, because everybody will point to like, okay, well, the practical things like dad needs to be home for dinner, or spend weekends together, or make it to every baseball game, or whatever. Like
the American family balance.
Exactly. And don't take the extra shift, or don't work the extra hours. Don't take the promotion if it's going to cause you to travel more. We point to those things. But I would even say within those, there's always exceptions where it's like, well, no, like if your family doesn't have enough for rent, then take the extra shift, right? Like there's going to be these times where maybe your physical presence isn't as important as the physical provision that you need to go out and create for your family. And I think, again, that's where discerning, you need a sermon as a parent, and there needs to be, okay, this kind of like checklist of, am I just going to sit here with my kids and wrestle with them while we don't have enough food? And my wife's like in the kitchen, like, man, are we going to, like, well, no. Like, yes, it's great to wrestle with your kids, but not if there's not enough food. Not if you're deficient in the bank account, or you don't have a place to live next month. Those are things that you need to tend to, as well as the spiritual, the emotional, the relational aspects of your children.
My mom was just at a Nancy Campbell conference this last week, an Above Ruby's conference, and one of Nancy's daughters, I don't know if it was Serene or Pearl, but one of their husbands had to leave for a big period of time, for months, to travel for work, and he was just gone for months at a time because there was no work locally, and he had to fly to a different country actually for months at a time. And they had a lot of little kids. And I just think, like, we're totally getting off on a tangent, but there's just seasons for all kinds of things. But getting back to.
Yes. So are idols a bad thing in your life? Absolutely.
Yes.
So I think that we do need to take that seriously. We need to take, so kind of going back to my thought process when this question was posed, is my knee jerk was to kind of ignore it. But then I was like, that's insane. Like, that I would ignore that critique or concern or just observation that people might have into our own life, because idolatry is a huge deal to God. And going back to the first commandment, thou shalt have no other gods before me, or then the second commandment, thou shalt not make any graven images. Is that the second commandment?
Thou shalt have no other gods before me, not making to thee any graven images.
Yes. Yeah, I nailed it. And so that was very clear. I think when you look at the Old Testament and much of the New Testament, when they were speaking to idolatry, it was really obvious because it's like, well, yeah, they carved up that tree and then they were praying to it. And so that's like 99% of the scenarios of idolatry in the Bible. It's this very practical, visible idol that was created. But then Jesus, when he comes to earth, levels up big time and kind of makes it way harder, right? Because obviously the Pharisees or the Jewish people were looking for the checklist. They were checking the boxes of like, well, hey, we don't carve any images here, and pray to them. We don't make any of these false gods. But clearly they were idolatrous in their heart. And when Jesus then leveled up and was like, well, actually, you should love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And, you should love that's the greatest commandment. And the second is like it, you should love your neighbor. That's devastating. Like if you think of being like, oh, I'm good. I'm checking the boxes of not making these idols or whatever the accepted definition of an idol was. And then he comes and says, no, actually it's way more impossible than that. It's this is the greatest commandment. And there's nothing liberating about that at all. Mm-hmm. Like people might think they're like, oh, that's great. Like that's less. It's just 2 laws, right there that we have to keep. And those are impossible. Nobody's ever done that. Nobody's loved the Lord their God with all their heart, soul, mind, and strength, and loved their neighbor as themselves. Are we to strive for it? Is that God's desire? Absolutely. But just as, Jesus said, hey, be ye perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect. Hopefully the listener and hopefully us as listeners read that and don't go be like, okay, man, so how do I do it? Like, how do I love the Lord my God with all my heart, soul, mind, and strength as best as, like, we should strive for that, but then you should acknowledge when he's saying that, like, oh, I can't do that. Like, I'm going to fall short of obeying all of God's commandments if that's what sums them all up. And so within that, yes, the gospel, Christ's perfect work, his faithfulness, like we don't find any hope in how much we love God, but in how much he loves us. We don't find any hope in how faithful we are to God, but in how faithful he is to us. So like the gospel, obviously that's such a, I guess, setup for the gospel when he comes in and takes that whole thou shalt have no other idols and levels it up to like, well, no, you just love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Because then what happens? Oh, you realize tons of things can become idols. It's not just the graven images. It's like the way you're making your sourdough. Your sourdough can become an idol, or the way you do your makeup and your own appearance can become an idol. And of course, your family, your children, the way, your home flow can become an idol where you're pouring. That's where your heart and soul's at. It's like my heart is like, I love with all my heart, soul, mind, and strength. What, your sports team, the Chicago Cubs, and that is probably the closest thing we have here in the U.S. of like the graven images is you like walk into somebody's room and they've got their sports team posters, or, trophies or something of their victories. And you're like, well, that's kind of a visible idol, but yes, we can create idols out of anything. So should we be conscientious of not making our family an idol? Yes, I think we definitely should.
Well, I think that there's something to this whole thing because it can get really muddy as Christians when we start being like, well, okay, if I'm putting all this, like as a mother, 90% of my time in my day is put towards my family. That's just where it's going. And so it can start to get really muddy where we start to think, okay, well, am I idolizing family then? Because I really care about my kids and I really care about my home and I really care about my husband. And I'm putting all this time and all this energy and all this mental effort there. So is that what I'm loving with all my heart, soul, mind, and strength? I remember coming to my mom with this question too, which is really sweet, but some of our kids have come to us and been like, Mommy, I don't know if I can love God more than I love you guys. And it's so sweet. And something that I encourage them in is you love God by loving your parents. And I think that all these things, the way that we make this clear, at least in my mind, is this idolatry or am I just being a faithful steward and passionate about what God's given me to do? Is maybe this is too simplistic, but it's worshiping the creation instead of the creator, right? We've heard that example. So people that go and worship nature instead of worshiping God who created it, But that doesn't mean you can't pour your heart and soul into stewarding your garden or your farm or whatever it is that God has given you to do, and obsess over it and love it and grow it to the best of your ability. That's not idolizing it, because you know that the Creator is the one that has given it to you. He's the one who sends the rain, sends the sun. He gives you the wisdom to know what to do. He gives everything, right? It's all his, and he could take it all away tomorrow. And I think of that when it comes to my family. I'm not constantly in this state of questioning, am I idolizing my family because I love my family so much? I have open hands with my family, knowing that God has given me these children. God's given me this marriage. And so I am free to love and invest and cultivate that to the best of my ability and seek God for wisdom. But at the end of the day, my hands are open. Our kids are his for as long as he chooses to give them to us, and they go back to him whenever he decides. You know, my marriage is loaned to me for as long as God allows Elisha and I to live together, and then it's gone. And so I don't think we need to live in fear, I guess, that something is an idol. If we can just acknowledge that, I think we're free, I guess, to really pour our heart and soul into something, just acknowledging that it's been given by our Creator and making sure we aren't worshiping the thing in and of itself, but seeing it as something that we serve our Creator by doing.
I 100% agree with everything you just said. And I think this is why it's my knee-jerk reaction to disregard this kind of thought or question. Again, I don't think I should always disregard it. I want to be conscientious of where my heart's at and my posture towards those things, because I would, so because Christ like raised the bar for what idolatry would be, and saying like, hey, where's your affection towards? Because of that, it's actually hard as an observer to know when somebody's idolatrous, right?
Yeah, you have no clue.
You have no clue. Whereas in the Old Testament, it's like, oh, the guy praying to the rocks, that's idolatry.
Yeah.
And now when it comes to the heart issue, what gets tricky is that somebody that's living, as you said, Katie, doing, like Colossians 3, whatever your hand finds to do it heartily as unto the Lord. So somebody obeying God in that manner and saying, oh my word, whether it's in botany or whether it's, who was the peanut guy, like George Washington Carver or something, it's like, man, you're making an idol out of peanuts. And it's like, no, he was serving the Lord. Like he was worshiping the Lord and obsessing over all that you can create from his creation, from peanuts. He wasn't worshiping the peanut. He was genuinely in worship. His work was worship to God. Now that same exact thing could be done, and it could be idolatry when God's not put first. Obviously, when it's not coming from a Christian worldview or coming from the worldview of. And the point, what I'm trying to say,
what I'm saying is the confusion comes from, is God being put first?
Amen. Yes.
Right.
Amen. And so what I was going to say is I think it's harder to even know, say in the context of family, when somebody's, or really any profession, like what I'm saying, I think somebody that's excellent in their given field, right? As a professionally or in ministry or in health or, relationally, that they could be just obeying God's command from Colossians, or to do all things as heartily as unto the Lord, or seeing that, man, I want to have my household in order, and that could be their heart. But then the same person could be having similar results doing it from a place of total idolatry.
Yeah, and it's just that own person knows their heart and their acknowledgement of God, or finding their comfort and their strength and their faith in those people. And I think that's something, if we're finding, if our spouse is our God to us, where, we are adhering to their word over God's, like when we know that it's out of line with Scripture, or when we know when we're worshiping our children versus delighting in them. It's a free gift. And I think that this is something, unfortunately, that Christians in today's day and age are so prone towards, is thinking that excellence, maybe this is subconscious, but we automatically rank excellence often with idolatry. We see like the gorgeous churches that Europe has, the the Roman Catholic Church erected, and we say, that's idolatry, instead of just saying, wow, that was something that was done incredibly by Christians. Like, that's incredible.
Like great art. Like they cared about
like fantastic art,
right.
Fantastic architecture. God loved gorgeous, beautifully crafted things. Like I'm reading the Old Testament right now. Yeah, he loves exactly the same yesterday, today, and forever, right? I'm reading in the Old Testament right now about the Ark of the Covenant. Covenant. Why do I keep saying that? I'm just going to stop while I'm behind. And the tabernacle and the temple. And he wanted these things with excellent workmanship.
Detail. Yeah.
Total detail. It was gaudy as all get out. It was not plain or drab or anything.
Or practical.
Practical. No, everything was gold plated, etched, pomegranates, just gorgeous, okay? Just dripping in gold and gorgeousness. And I think that with sometimes our little like judgy Christian perspectives could look at something like that in today's day and age and be like, well, that's materialistic, or that's focusing on earthly things, or that's putting too much effort into wood, hay, and stubble, and it's all going to burn here. But God cared. And I think that as Christians, we can seek excellence and not get caught up in idolizing the excellence in and of itself, but having it be a vehicle that propels us towards worshiping our Creator.
Amen. I mean, amen to everything you just said. I just got fired up. That was awesome, Katie. I haven't heard you talk about that, but that was good. Well, and I think about that, even going back to Jesus saying, hey, this is the greatest commandment, that you should love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Like that's not just, we know that that's not the navel-gazing monk. Like we know that's not just, okay, I need to have well, actually, a lot of people don't know that, obviously. Like asceticism is still a big thing, even within Christianity, even within evangelicalism, like even within Protestantism, where you think like these physical things are taking away from my spiritual experience with God. Again, can they? Of course they can. But God made these things to be a tremendous blessing. Like you said, somebody in nature, looking at a sunset with as a Christian should bring you to awe and worship, right? And then nerding out on science, somebody or engineering, like any field. I don't care what, if you're in if you work for the U.S. Postal Service, like nerding out on the most efficient way to do your job and how you can best serve your customers, or, be a great employee to your boss. Nerding out on the details, I think should be a Christian at work, like should be striving for excellence. And that's an area that I've big time failed at, and I want to grow. And I think you and I are both kind of growing in this area where it's like, oh, this is worship. This is honoring to God when you're doing the thing that nobody might see, that your kids might not even appreciate. You go back to the work of a mother. It's like, wow, the kids don't even say anything when I set the table, with nice napkins or, a nice tablecloth. Obviously I love it. I appreciate it. But you're putting forth more effort. Like, you're being more obedient to God by having your heart really invested in the work that he has for you in this season. And so, yeah, I do think that regardless of, I go back to being a barista, like for way too many years, I became so apathetic. It was like, well, this work doesn't matter. And I would look at people that nerded out on it and be like, well, one, they're nerding out on it, so I don't want to do that. But it's like, oh, they're making an idol out of coffee, or out of customer service, or they're just doing it for show, or they're doing it to, have men speak well of them. They're doing it for men's approval. And you start to, make excuses for your apathy, essentially, or your laziness. And going back to like, I think loving the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength does look like work. So it's like, we're not working for our salvation. We're not working for God's approval of us. It's found in Christ's work 100%. But loving anybody involves doing. It involves pursuing them. Like we know that like our spouse wouldn't appreciate it very much if we're like, no, I'm just going to stay down here in my room and think about how much I love you. Like, how long are you going to do that? You're like, always. All I'm going to do is just stay down in here in our room while you go and work. And, and you clean up the house and I'm just going to think about how much I love you. No, the love would would look like something. It would look like serving you. It would look like going to work. It would look like being with you, going and even doing recreational activities, all sorts of recreational activities, and playing with the kids and enjoying art, enjoying music. Like you're pursuing that. And I think the same goes when we pursue loving God. It's pursuing his creation. It's pursuing excellence in whatever field we're currently in academia, in the arts, and in engineering, and whatever. I don't know any other careers. Those are the only ones I know about. But if there are any other careers, I think you can pursue worship of God, and it might, to an outsider, look like you're idolizing the thing.
Well, yeah, that's what I was going to say. You brought up a really good point. As I was thinking back to the time and place where God gave this command, it was this line where basically he was saying, you have no clue whose heart is in the right place. And I think God was making it very clear that we just don't have a clue. We can't place our little judgments on someone else's life. This is now between the Holy Spirit and us. And as far as like, God is my judge, God is my witness, because up until this point, there were boxes that were very clearly seen for everybody else to see. And like you said, God came in at this point and said, okay, this is about the heart here. And you're checking all the boxes and you're still doing it wrong. These people you say aren't checking all the boxes and they're doing it right. And so I think we need to kind of throw out whatever our little judgment scale is when it comes to this is someone's idol or this person's struggling with idolatry, and really focus on our own lives before God, and question, sometimes I do have to question that. Okay, Lord, if you took Elisha from me, what would my heart posture be towards you right now? He's yours. He's not mine. I cannot hold this relationship so tightly. If you were to take one of my kids from me, that would be the most heartbreaking tragedy I'd ever go through, but they're yours. I have to remember they're yours. And I think that that's a good thing to remind ourselves of as we're going through life, and we're just so thankful for the blessings that he's given us. But that doesn't stop pouring our heart and soul into doing the best that we possibly can with those things. And I just think there's a line there, like you said, where it's really hard to see from the outside where someone's heart is, because you can think, oh, that person's totally walking with God. And then, tragedy occurs and they throw out their faith. And it's like, okay, well, their faith clearly was not put in the right place.
In God.
It was not in God.
Yeah.
And that's what it comes down to. I hesitate to say ultimately, but is your faith in God?
Yeah.
Or is it in your money?
Yeah, or the works
because
that you're doing.
One of the richest couples I know, and they're very, very, very wealthy, it has the most freedom with money. And you go in, you experience the joy of the Lord, and you don't think for a second, oh, if all this were gone tomorrow and they were on the street, they'd be like, I'm over this Christianity thing.
Yes.
It's not even a thing.
Right.
More than some people I know that are broke.
Right. Money's way more of an idol for those people.
Yeah, money's way more of an idol, so we can't say these things just because someone's being very fruitful in an area. We can't say that fruitfulness is stemming from idolatry.
Right. Yeah.
We can say that fruitfulness is stemming from stewardship.
Yes.
Just the same way.
And working heartily is unto the Lord. You
Yeah.
know, like working with excellence, pursuing excellence, which is clearly what the Bible tells us to do. And I would, getting back kind of like to the whole circling back to the family, because I agree with everything you said in general about idolatry and things becoming an idol. I do think things that my dad would be criticized for, and oftentimes, he would be said to have, what am I saying? People were accusing him. That's what I was looking of idolizing his family, is when that person would say, look at all these other needs. Like, look at all these needs in the community, and you're not willing to give us one evening a week to come speak to these men or to these married couples. And here's the deal. Like, Jesus told us, like, the poor and the sick you're always going to have with you. And your mom always says that what does she say?
A need doesn't constitute a call.
A call. Yeah. Well, and I think she says in something else too. Maybe it's somebody else. So like the need will always exceed our capability. No, is that not your mom?
Oh, like, I think that's newer. I think that's since we've been married. I don't know that one so well.
And so when you look at the world, you're like, okay, Do we want to be generous with our time and our money? Absolutely. Do we have enough money to solve all of the world's problems? No. Do we have enough time to solve all of the world's problems?
No.
We don't, right? Like, do we have enough time to solve all of our community's problems? No. Even our local churches? No, we don't have the time, right? Or that capability to do that. And so according to how we see God's hierarchy being, we need to steward our time wisely. And this isn't, again, we can point to the scripture and and God prioritizing family before you start that organized ministry work, or that church type work. But then also anecdotally, we all see this. We all see it here in 2024, the families where the husband and the wife are, volunteering for women's ministry, and he's volunteering for the prison ministry, and they're like ships passing at the nighttime, like in the nighttime. That never ends well for the family, for the marriage, and the fruit is it's very short. You're looking at these short-term needs and not thinking of long-term fruit at all, and you're putting a bunch of Band-Aids on things at the expense of the first ministry that God gave you. And what's crazy is that I think when you obey God and when you are faithful to his order of things, the long-term fruit is far more effective too. As far as, yes, are those needs for whatever fill in the blank ministry that your church is a part of, is that a real need? Absolutely. When you are faithful and walking out in the order that God has given to us as far as priorities go, those needs start being met too.
Well, yeah, the healthiest thing for the church is a healthy family. Because guess what? That couple doesn't need couples counseling, and their kids don't need kids therapy, and they aren't having kids out of wedlock that now need adoption services. Like, the healthiest thing for the church is a healthy, stable family that is able to open up their doors and love on other people as they can, and not at the expense of.
Yes.
And I think that you mentioned timelines, and I think the problem is that here in the West, our timeline is 18 years old for kids. And so you think, oh, this couple can invest in, be ships passing in the night or whatever, because they have a 14-year-old, they have 4 more years with that child, and then they're out of the house. And, they're almost these empty nesters. Instead of like, are these parents available for their kids in their single season when they are married? Are they best friends with them when they're counseling them and have good relationships with them? That's when every parent is in a counseling role. When you have adult children that are married and then they're having grandkids, are they available for their grandchildren's needs and for their great-grandchildren? When you have that multi-generational view, it's not just, well, you need to stay home for the 3 kids that you have right now and you've got more bandwidth, so you should be in church ministry. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do think, were you finishing your thought?
Yeah, no.
Go for it. Wait.
No, I wasn't.
Which one? Which one's your answer? I do think timelines plays a huge factor in this. And because I want to state, we value those other ministries that I kind of like mentioned offhand, prison ministry or women's ministries or family ministries or marriage counseling ministries that churches are a part. I mean, our church has phenomenal ministries, I think, like in all those areas, and we're grateful for it.
People come from churches all around to go to those ministries. We're really grateful for that.
Church. Yeah. And like, we are so proud of them, I guess, like we're so grateful that that's what our church is about. But when it comes to our time, I think there's an acknowledgement of like, wait, that's not for us right now. Right. Like, I someday prison ministry, I think would be awesome if that was in my future, or young men's ministry in a more consistent basis on my life, or maybe someday you and I being in marriage counseling at some point in our future.
I don't know.
Sounds fun, huh?
That sounds hard.
But right now it's like, wait a second. And I know that this is like very, this is like, coloring with crayons. No, it's like building with Dupolos. Or it's like building with, instead of Legos, it's Dupolos, but I think in big chunks. And so it's like my 20s, I felt like I'm viewing my 30s as like, I really want to prioritize my marriage and my children, right? Like, as far as relationally, bandwidth, these are very crucial years. I could see later on, and depending on how many children the Lord blesses us with, if we have young children and I'm still in my later 40s, that might still be the priority, obviously. But this is my human thinking, like, oh man, I love those ministries, hopefully in my 40s and 50s and 60s, because that's what I also saw modeled with my father. it's like my dad is doing those church ministries because his children are raised. They're walking in the faith. They're now kind of a testament to his faithfulness, and they're his crown of glory. And that gives him more ministry opportunities. And so I'm not saying that that's got to be the timeline for everyone, but I do think that there are seasons where you should prioritize your family more than other seasons.
And it doesn't have to be idolatry. I'm just
Yes.
curious that which stage was the Legos and which stage was the Duplos.
Well, I was saying Dupelos was like, I'm thinking very big here, like 10-year chunks.
Gotcha.
Whereas
Yes.
Lego, it's a little bit more like, I feel like this requires a little bit for fine motor skills.
Like tomorrow you're leading home group.
Yeah, exactly.
That would be the Lego.
Yes, exactly. And that's a good point. Like,
And we do sprinklings of stuff like that right now.
exactly. Like when I'm available and able, I, will help out on the worship team.
Mm-hmm.
If we can lead, you regularly make a meal for like a ton of people at our small group, and
Well, yeah, we have stuff we're invested
so
in.
that's what I'm
I
trying
don't
to say.
need
It's not like, oh, we're shut down 100% to outside ministry or to hospitality or to, serving a family in need or, taking care of widows. But it's right now going to look disproportionate towards our home because I think of the season that we're in.
Yes, exactly. And also, I don't know if we've got enough time to dive into this, but I think what a lot of people bring up with this idolizing conversation are those verses that we just went through with our church, actually in Matthew, where Jesus says, I have no sister, I have no brothers, or I've come to, do you know what I'm talking about?
I mean, yeah, it's like you said, it's in Matthew, but I can't quote it.
Well, do you think we should just do another episode on that?
Yeah, maybe we should do another episode on that.
Yeah, because I think that would be a worthwhile conversation, kind of diving into, sometimes there's confusion around those verses too. Like, okay, well, God, Jesus, when he was here on earth, said these things like, I came to pit father against son and daughter against mother. And if you don't hate your family, you don't love me. These really big, bold claims.
So who is my mother? Who are my brothers? And then he looked at his disciples and he said, These are my brothers.
Yeah. And so a lot of people use that as an excuse to abandon family or say that the physical blood connection family that you have is not as important as the church family. And that isn't what Jesus was saying in every circumstance. And so I think that is worth examining, because that hierarchy does not supersede your relational family within your home right now.
Well, within your current home. Yeah. I mean, I think maybe we should just do a whole, and that you brought this all up because I do think that verse, when you look at the context of first generation Christians, it's like they were literally going to be,
well, do you want to just do this one tonight?
Sure. One more thing on the idolatry.
Yeah. So that'll be the next episode we put out.
Really? You're committing to it?
Well, I don't know. I think it goes hand in hand with this conversation.
Sure. I was going to say one more thing about the idolatry.
Yeah, let's stick on that topic.
Well,
I'm going to overcommit us here.
Oh, yeah. I would say this, and this is, again, I'm not pulling any scriptures here to validate this. This is just my opinion. It does seem like we would never criticize somebody for pouring their time and energy into something if it was for the sake of salvaging it. Like if it was from a place of crisis, right? Like when somebody's diagnosed with cancer, it's like, well, yeah, like don't miss your chemo sessions. Like don't miss a day of your treatment. Like for however many months it is, like we get that, right? Like it's this dire situation. And that's an extreme example, but it's the same thing even when I brought up like a financial circumstance where it's like, hey, I lost my job. And they're like, oh, we get it. Like you don't have the bandwidth to do that. And I think we would say the same thing even with families where it's like, hey, my kid, like you brought up, like, my daughter, we found out she's pregnant. She's not talking to us. It's like, oh man, tend to that. Right. Like, so we get it when there's these extreme circumstances. It's like,
crisis.
the crisis. Yeah. Then you're like, tend to that. Like, take care of your daughter, counsel her, be there for her child, be available to support her in that season. But like with so many things, it's like when there's preventative measures being taken place, it's like we don't value it the same way.
Yeah.
Right?
We say like that's a waste of money, waste of time. It's just extra. It seems over the top.
Yeah, excessive. And you could even say like you're idolizing it, right? Like why are you so rigid with your health, the nutrition. It's like you're measuring whatever, and you're not letting these ingredients into your home, or you're purifying your water, or
we spend a ton of money on supplements every month.
Yes, exactly.
And I think that could be seen as like, okay, that's excessive. Why are you putting your money there? Like, you're just, yeah. I don't know what the term is on the tip of my tongue, but it seems like just like so self-centered or whatever.
Yes.
Instead of being like, okay, well, if you aren't in the hospital,
you're far more valuable to the church.
You're a lot more valuable to everybody.
Yeah. And I think the same can be said about families. It's in prioritizing your marriage. It's like, oh, you're so faithful on your date night you won't miss a date night, even for, well, like, we're doing a conference at the church. Like, you can't just, give up your date night to come be a part of this. But we wouldn't criticize them if it's like, hey, like,
we're going to get a divorce.
Yeah, exactly. It's like,
we need to go to therapy.
Yeah, we're not even living together right now. I was like, what do you do? Like, get that figured out, like, don't. And so I just don't want things to get to the crisis point, and I want to value them the same way, though. Like, I want to do that preemptive work, that preventative work with my children. And preventative sounds like so defensive, but it's because it's really rewarding in the moment too.
And it is. You're on the offense. I think we need to view what we quantify as defensive measures as offensive measures. Like, we are taking steps. We aren't just letting things happen to us and then having to deal with it.
Yes.
Yeah. So we aren't putting ourselves in a position of reacting as often as we possibly can. Yes. I think when it comes, maybe to kind of start wrapping this up, when it comes to idolizing our families, I think Elisha and I were laughing the other day. This kind of reminds me of our coffee conversation, how I was checking into bone broth and just kind of nerding out about bone broth. And some people were saying, this is awesome. It's an awesome coffee replacement. And I bring up these coffee replacements to Elisha all the time as a joke, because he drinks coffee in the morning.
What were you going to say? Have a coffee problem? What were you going to say?
No, he doesn't.
Have a coffee addiction?
No, you don't actually, which I really appreciate. But you enjoy your cup of coffee in the morning, and we laugh because everything's a coffee substitute, like dandelion greens, tea, any kind of potent drink, shake, whatever. It's always touted as a coffee substitute.
Water.
Like, I like my coffee. Like, why can't I just enjoy my coffee as my coffee? And I think but we laugh because people are so quick to try to find a coffee substitute when they're drinking like diet sodas or having sugar, or like, that's not the biggest health issue in their life, but they want to find a replacement for it for whatever reason. Like, black coffee has gotten this, like, we need to find a replacement for the coffee in the morning.
I think what it is, it's not black coffee. It's because people, the way they take their coffee now is so sugary.
If drinking
and like
bone broth in lieu of coffee, I'm assuming it's like black, not like Dunkin' Donuts, because it does not smell very good. But you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Where everyone tries to, we could do it with a variety of areas, but we pick this one thing and we're like, we need to work on, whatever the issue may be.
Oh,
and it's not necessarily the most important issue to your health. It's like, okay, well, I'm eating 5,000 calories a day, but I've found a coffee replacement, and it's like, well, maybe like just keep the coffee and like work on the 5,000 calorie consumption.
Got it. And so you're saying, to finish your thought for you maybe now, see if I'm tracking with you.
We'll have a courageous conversation.
If somebody's like, well, we need to make sure, we need to put like safety guidelines in place so that we don't idolize our family.
Yes.
You're like, oh, that's not like, that's not a big problem right now.
In the Western world,
in the West,
idolizing your family is the splinter in your eye, and you've got a beam in your back. Okay? And the beam is money, sports, entertainment, socialization, comfort, food, leisure,
debt, consumer spending,
debt, materialism. Guys, we have got idols, okay? Yes. And they are everywhere. And I am so convicted of them anytime we talk about idolatry.
Right.
And where family is? Like, the top, I don't even know who's doing that. Like, I literally do not know a person right now who is idolizing their family. Okay?
Right.
Like, so maybe, I'm not saying that it doesn't need to be addressed, because it could be a thing. But if we're going to talk about idolization, let's like really clearly identify the idols in our own lives and focus on pouring into our families as best as we know how.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty safe bet.
I agree. And that's another thing, just as far as like within our sphere of people that we're with, right? Because we grew up homeschooled, grew up conservative Christians, and different kind of we bounced around conservative Christian pockets, right, within the homeschooling community. And so even now, a lot of times the criticism towards that general demographic of people is it's like, oh, well, we even go back to like why reasons people don't homeschool. You know, you're kind of like that. Like, why is that showing up on your radar as a priority? You know, as far as like, well, they're going to be socially inept, you know, or like they're not going to have the same type of like work opportunities or being, you know how to connect with outside, or they'll be exclusive. They'll live in a bubble. And it's like, what? Okay, maybe, yes. Should we address those things? Yeah. But as far as the souls of our children and what is happening out in the world, in the public schools, in academia, and, just like the liberal agenda and ideology that's being, I guess, just propagated throughout public schools, like, should we worry about our kids' socialization? Yes, but like so many times less than these other things that are going on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, yeah, anything that's going to take us away from God, obviously, constitutes awareness.
Yeah.
and a healthy fear around, because we don't want to do that. But I don't know who's doing that. So,
folks, thank you all so much for listening. We'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.